Hello and welcome to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I am the traffic anchor and the transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber. And if you want to be on the show, of course, you can always give me a call on the hotline. That's what people in radio like to do. They call the special number the hotline. It's 303-832-0217, 303-832-0217 for your international callers. I think you have to dial 01 before that. Anyway, I have Snapchat, but not hooked up to that line. Not Snapchat, the other one, WhatsApp. But it's not hooked up to that line. You could always, of course, get all this contact information on the description of the podcast. Today, I have an interesting guest. Today, I'm going to have on Joe Moore. Joe is the Chief Marketing Officer and the co-founder of the Xtreme Xperience. Now, it's spelled with a lot of X's. Xtreme with an X and Xperience with another capital X. Now, the way they explain the Xtreme Xperience is they want to make the world's most exclusive cars accessible to the masses. So they have some of the coolest, some of the fastest, some of the most expensive cars around. And they let you, for a fee, of course, come right up to this rented racetrack, go through a little training course, apparently, and then get in one of these cars and drive it. I think it's a pretty big liability. We'll ask Joe about that. And I'm not sure how fast you can go. We'll ask Joe about that as well, if you can really open it up and let it all out, because I would, if you think you really want to go 200 miles an hour, I think some of the cars go close to that. But once you're driving that fast, you really start freaking out. All right. Truth be told, I had this endorsement deal when I was in radio with Mercedes-Benz, with the national corporation, and they gave me a car to drive for an entire year. It was really kind of silly because I had to drive a company car, the company truck, because it had all the broadcast equipment in it, and I did part of my traffic reporting duties when I was in the truck driving between there, like my home and the helicopter. So I needed to have that truck, and so I didn't drive that car very often. I drove it around a little bit, but all I had to do was put gas in it. They provided everything. They gave me the insurance, and they gave me the car, and all I had to do was put gas. It was really, really cool. Anyway, my wife and I took it out to Las Vegas for a little vacation, and we were in nowhere, Utah. No one's around. I don't know. I got over 100 something, and I was a little freaked out. I mean, I got to tell you. It was exhilarating and freaking out at the same time. So I think I hit, 115 maybe, 120-ish. I don't know, somewhere in that range. I think the statute of limitations protects me from getting a ticket now from the Utah State Patrol. Anyway, when you're going that fast and then you start slowing down, it feels like you're crawling. It's really weird. But I wonder, because when you get up to that 120, maybe 140, 150 in one of those cars, if you start freaking out so much you don't want to go any faster, even though the cars probably could. Anyway, and what happens if you wrecked one of those cars? I mean, these cars are a couple $100,000. I mean, what do you do if you wreck one of these? Well, I'll ask Joe about that too. And he should be coming on here in just a couple of minutes. This would be the time, normally, in a normal year, for holiday parties. But there's not a lot of holiday parties happening now because of the pandemic. But we still know that it's easy to drink too much at a holiday party. But one man from Perth, Australia, learned the hard way that it's just as dangerous to eat a whole lot of rum balls, which, you guessed it, were made with spiced rum. Tommy Keefe, he just left a friend's house, and they were having a birthday party, and he ate more than his fair share of the apparently delicious and addicting rum balls. In fact, he was still eating them in his car. He took some on the road. So the police pulled him over because apparently he was weaving or doing enough bad driving behavior to get pulled over. And the police asked him to perform a breath test, which came back positive for alcohol. He imagined the cakes were harmless since they were made with rum essence and not actual rum, the beverage, as you would get in, like a Captain Morgan's, right? Tommy's his breath test, it returned a reading of 0.038. Now, just for reference, 0.08 is in most U.S. states, the legal limit that would be the limit at where you would get a DUI. Well, apparently in Australia, it's a little bit different. Their legal limit is 0.02 for early drivers, what they say. I don't know how old Tommy is, but they called him an early driver. So Tommy pleaded guilty to DUI, was recently handed a reduced suspension sentence of 3 months and the minimal fine, which he says he's thankful for because the judge was so understanding about the circumstances of his faux pas. So one doctor was interviewed by news.com there in Australia, and that doctor said a blood test would probably have come back negative, in which case Tommy would have never had his license suspended in the first place because there was the rum essence in his breath, and that came out, and it made it basically a false positive. Instead of really being drunk, he had some of the alcohol essence in him, and so that came out in his breath. But that said, you can get drunk if you ingest too much of any essence, whether it's rum or vanilla extract or all made with alcohol. And while you really won't get drunk if you take just one sip, the story is different if you ingest a whole lot of it. And driving under the influence of that type of flavoring apparently isn't all that rare. To be fair, in instances like this that have made headlines in recent years, drivers have been drinking the extract as it was basically straight from the bottle. I don't know if I would condone that. I mean, have you ever had peppermint schnapps straight from the bottle? I mean, that stuff is awful. Well, Tommy's mishap shows you that you should just be careful with your cake intake, especially if it's rum cake. And not just because of the alcohol content, but maybe your waistline as well. I was up in the Colorado mountains for the Thanksgiving weekend. Had a couple of days off, and my anniversary was also the same weekend. We got married 17 years ago, right after Thanksgiving. And we decided to do a last-minute getaway to go up to this town called Salida, which is in south central Colorado, and go and ski at this independent ski resort called Monarch. And it's a pretty high, it's up at 11,000 feet, and they have usually a whole lot of snow. And they had a bunch of snow, but it was starting to get a little bit rocky at some of the points. But recently, when we were driving back, I saw a few Christmas trees strapped to the top of cars. And I was talking about this to our local AAA expert that I've had here on the show, Skylar McKinley. And we were running this segment that we do on Denver 7 for the weekends with these AAA segments. And so I was talking to Skylar about this, and they apparently have seen some very high car repair bills because drivers are not doing it right, putting their tree on the car, either not strapping it down right and it falls off, or they're putting it up on their car and they're getting their car all scratched up. And Skylar told me they've seen repair bills totaling up to like $1,500 for people messing up their car with the Christmas tree. And that the twine or the ropes and the straps that they use to hold down the tree will wear away the paint or tear your rubber seals when you roll it through the door. A lot of people like to put the twine and then they put it into the door and then they slam the door. Or they do that with the window and then they roll the window up and they have the rope in the window. Well, that can damage that stuff. It can actually bend it out of place a little bit, bend the window frame or even bend the door a little bit. And that obviously is not a good thing to do. And then the tree branches that are bouncing around, they can scratch off some of the paint or do other damage. But the most dangerous part is not just tying down the tree properly and having it up there, maybe not even putting a blanket down, is that people don't tie down the tree right, and the tree falls off the car. And that commonly happens, apparently. That's what we were talking about. And you can imagine it's pretty dangerous. Now, what the State Patrol has told me in the past, that if something falls off your car and causes damage to another car, it's considered a crash. And if someone is injured due to that crash, then it's actually a severe traffic offense that can often have big fines and potentially jail time involved. And for a variety of reasons, it's important, obviously, to properly secure your Christmas tree before you leave the lot. And you'll see those trucks. I did a story on this a while back. You've seen the trucks where it says not responsible for broken windshields. And that's only the case if something was already on the road and a tire kicks it up into your car and damages your windshield or damages your car. If something's on the road and it hits your car, then that they are not at fault. But if something drops off of or out of your car, then you are at fault for that. So it's pretty important before you leave the tree lot to tie that sucker down right. It also doesn't hurt to wrap it up. Skylar said you could use twine or netting. I don't know about putting a net around a Christmas tree, but he also said, make sure, it sounds like it's common sense, but make sure that the trunk is facing forward. That's that's a really good idea. But the worst part about the holidays for me, at least this time of year, is going to the mall. And I hate going to the mall and fighting all the people for parking spots. And I usually park way out, and then I let those aggressive mall shoppers fight for the up-close spots where they're just waiting and waiting, or they're following somebody out of the store. Have you seen that move? Where they follow somebody down the line and then just park it and wait for them to get in and get all their stuff and then get out. And then they get the space. And it's so funny when somebody does that. They're walking down the aisle, and their car is not right there in that one aisle. It's actually the next one over, and they just cut through. Oh, those drivers get so mad. But the real dangerous situation there in the parking lot is really more these little fender benders, or getting your car dinged up, or hitting somebody's car door with your car door. And we were talking about this with Skylar, but because you're in a private car lot, it's a little bit tricky with your insurance if you get into these little minor crashes or someone dings up your car. And for liability reasons, they say these sorts of crashes typically falls on whichever vehicle was moving and how it was moving. So if only one car is moving, the driver of that car normally would be at fault. If both drivers are in motion, then one person normally has the right of way, depending on that lane or how traffic is supposed to flow. And so that's how you determine who is at fault. If a driver fails to yield or moves a little bit too fast, they are often at fault. Sometimes both drivers are at fault. If your car is parked, you're probably not at fault. But if your car is damaged while you're both parked, then it depends on who did the damaging. Let's say you open your car door into somebody else's, then obviously it's your fault. And if you ever do get into a wreck or have some damage, it's always best to record it, get some photos, videos with your phone. That's easy to do. And if the other driver is still around, obviously take their name and their address and phone number and the insurance information, all that stuff. Always good to gather as much information as possible. But I'm telling you, that's the worst. Shopping at the mall. And I think there will be fewer people doing that this season just because of the limited amount of people that can go into stores and malls now, and so many people are shopping online. That's what I do. I've always done as much as I can online shopping, and that's what I'm going to do this year as well. And speaking of shopping and gifts, when you see an expensive exotic sports car, do you just wish or do you just dream that you could, even for a little while, drive it? Even in the heart of the worst part of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Xtreme Xperience is still touring the country, letting you try out their lot of various sports cars. Joining me now to talk about this is Joe Moore. Joe is the Chief Marketing Officer and the co-founder of the Xtreme Xperience. Joe, a self-described enthusiastic car guy, sees the opportunity to help create the Xtreme Xperience and set out to make the world's most exclusive cars available to the masses. Joe, thanks so much for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, Joe. So before we talk about the experience and what the drivers can expect from it, we'll go into all that stuff. It sounds like you were just tired of the corporate rat race and decided to get into real racing instead.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. My best friend Adam, he's our CEO. We've been friends since college. We went to Miami University in Ohio together, and I moved to Chicago after college, and he was working at a luxury car rental company. Had the idea to make the luxury rental cars more accessible by running a Groupon, and they sold a couple thousand Groupons overnight. And he's like, "Whoa, I need some help, like running this thing. We're gonna have 1,000 people show up at this racetrack." So he asked me, and as a car guy my whole life, I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to help you." And that was my ticket out of doing the corporate gig, working at a marketing agency at the time, and the rest is history.
And it's really different than, like you said, renting. My father-in-law was asking just today. He said, do you know, because he has a reunion coming up, and he thought, well, maybe I can rent one of those really cool cars. Are there any places like that I can rent a car? So it's completely different than that.
Very different. Yeah. I mean, the origins of the business are in the rental industry. Like, yeah, if you want to rent a Lamborghini or Ferrari in Chicago back when we started this business, it was about anywhere from like $1,500 to a couple $1,000s a day to rent one of those cars, and you had to put these huge cash deposits down, and it was not a very consumer-friendly business. Only very few people, rappers when they showed up in town, or wealthy tourists would take us up on that offer. And so the real idea was just people kept calling and saying, "Hey, I'd like to just can you show up at a birthday party? Can I just drive it around the block? Like, can I do a little thing?" And so that's where the idea for the actual experience came around. Because, the thing was, you could go rent a Lamborghini, like I said, for a couple grand a day, but then you got to go break every traffic law under the book to enjoy that vehicle and endanger people and yourself. So the racetrack really was a natural place to do it. And so what we're actually selling is the experience of driving these supercars on a real racetrack for a few laps at a time to really see what the car is capable of, versus just cruising around town and going the speed limit, maybe going out to dinner.
I think about that every time I see a really high-end sports car, is that you have this beast that can go 4 times how fast you're going right now.
Yeah.
Yet you're just driving it down on the interstate with me, some schlep in a Chevy. So it always made me laugh.
Yeah, it's hard to, having driven them around town, you get all you really do is turn a lot of heads and worry about someone crashing into you. Because everybody's got their cell phone pointed at the bright green Lamborghini at the stoplight. So yeah, definitely want to get these things on a racetrack where you can really enjoy them and go well over 100, 150 miles an hour and feel the brakes and the handling and everything else.
All right, let's talk about this Xtreme Xperience. We'll talk about some of the specifics about it, but what exactly is the Xtreme Xperience?
Yeah, so we own and operate a fleet of exotic cars that we bring to racetracks all around the country, with semi-trucks and trailers, a lot like a motorsports team. And the whole goal is to actually open this thing up to the public, to let the general public come drive these cars on a racetrack. So what it looks like is typically you'd book your driving experience on our website. We've got 35 locations across the country, different tracks. So you'll find a track near you, choose the car you want, and book your driving experience. And then the day comes, you show up at the racetrack, and we check you in. We give you a classroom session, a pre-drive class, so that you're learning a little bit about what you're doing. We could touch on that further if you'd like. And then we provide you with a racing helmet and a pro instructor in the right seat. And then you get to go out and drive the car on a racetrack, starting at 3 laps, and then it kind of goes up from there. And yeah, from right out of the gate, there's no speed limits, there's no experience required. And our pro instructors are experts at gauging people's driving abilities and getting you up to speed in no time.
So really, I could show up, take your little course that you said, and we'll go into that in just a second, but there is no speed limit? I could just, if I have the ability, I could drive the McLaren at 200 miles an hour?
Yeah, I wish it could go 200 miles an hour. There's basically, you're limited by the racetrack length and straightaway. So some of the longest tracks that we go to are, let's say, a 3,200 foot long straightaway at the racetrack in New Orleans, NOLA Motorsports Park, or anything over 3,000 feet. That's a long straightaway for a racetrack. Some of the longest in the country at that length. And so you can typically get a car, if you come out of a corner properly, up to about 160 miles an hour on one of those tracks. If you're going over 140 on any racetrack in America, you're really moving. there's really nowhere else that you can go 200. But yeah, the point is that within your driving ability and the length of the straightaway before you've got to get on the brakes and make a hard turn, you can go absolutely as fast as you want.
That's amazing. I've gone fairly fast when I was on some open road in a well, I guess I had this endorsement deal with Mercedes National, and they gave me a car for a year, and so my wife and I drove it before we had kids out to Las Vegas, and I got it up a little bit higher than 100 or so that I could admit to you right now. But
Yep.
I was a wreck the entire time, just nervous about it, even though there was nobody around me, and it's wide open straight, you could see forever, but I would still feel, I think, a little bit nervous. Isn't that natural to feel a little bit nervous trying to take a car at 140 or 50 or 60 miles an hour?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you should be nervous. You're moving a big hunk of metal over 150 miles an hour. The cars are extremely safe, and racetracks are a safe place to do it, as we've got barriers and runoff and sand traps and everything else like that. But yeah, I mean, anytime you're moving at high speeds, a problem can be compounded very quickly. So it's natural to have that little thought in your head. But the good news is that, like I said, we've got a team that maintains these vehicles. So you don't, tires, brakes, all the different things that you would look at mechanically. And then, of course, the racetrack and the pro instructors and safety teams on site and everything like that. So as soon as you have that little thought in your head, you can kind of calm it with the reality that, you're on a controlled environment. And but yeah, once you get over 130, 140, I start to have that feeling of like you still see the speedometer going up, and you're kind of going, whoa, this is, kind of start to get that back. You want to breathe off the throttle a little bit. It's definitely a natural reaction.
I'm sure. I'm speaking with Joe Moore, the Chief Marketing Officer, co-founder of the Xtreme Xperience. Where did you get all of these cars, and why did you choose the cars that you chose?
That's a great question. So we currently have about 35 to 40 exotic cars in our fleet. We're always rotating them through, so it's hard to keep an exact head count. But we started with, I think, one or two cars from one of the co-founders, and since then, I mean, honestly, originally we had a deal with a local dealership that they would like short-term lease the vehicles to us, as long as we didn't break them and turn them back to them in good shape, good condition. It was all good. But as we began to grow, we just started to buy one car at a time and just acquired them all. So we actually own the whole fleet of vehicles. We don't have any manufacturer support for any of them. It's just, we're just like any other person. You walk into a dealership, you buy a car. We do it a little bit smarter than that. But yeah, we've just acquired them over the years. And as far as the selection goes, we try to stay on top of what's trending. So, Lamborghinis and Ferraris are bucket list cars that people are always going to want to drive. So we offer the Huracan LP610 Lamborghini and the Ferrari 48 GTB. We'll be refreshing those with newer, the newest generations in the near future. But then when anytime a new car comes out that graces the cover of all of our favorite magazines like Motor Trend or something, we're going to look at those to say, with all the press behind that model of car, is that something we want to add? So this year, actually, we're excited to be adding the Porsche 911 GT3 RS, which is a car enthusiast dream car. It's the Porsche built for the track, and the Mercedes AMG GTR. That's been really popular. And just in 2020, we added the brand new Corvette C8. Obviously, there was a whole lot of hype around the Corvette going to a mid-engine setup, so that was on all the magazines and all the TV shows and everything. And the Mustang Shelby GT500, 760 horsepower Mustang with a dual clutch automatic transmission that people were really excited about launching, tons of hype behind that. So we really, it's a hybrid of what are on the pages of the magazines and what do we want to drive ourselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. Some of those cars are just remarkable. What if I had a really cool, one of the latest Corvettes that I thought was faster than any of your cars? Could I bring it out to the track and drive it myself?
You can, just not with our program.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually own all the vehicles and rent the track time privately ourselves, and then the insurance for us, we can only run our own vehicles. However, we do get this question a lot, and my advice is anybody who wants to take their own car on track, just Google, local racetrack, and you'll usually find that they have open track days and high performance driving experience days where you can get your own car on the racetrack. I highly encourage it. If you've got a fast car, you should get it on the racetrack, see what it's capable of, and enjoy it on a racetrack for sure.
You mentioned insurance. There is mandatory, as I was reading through the program, mandatory insurance that's required that costs $39. How does that cover the cost of wrecking one of these cars or the medical costs if somebody does get into a wreck?
That's a great question. So the events themselves, the driving experience, when we rent the racetrack for a few days, we actually are carrying an insurance policy from a third party who would cover any sort of liability, any sort of accident like injury or anything like that. But there's no insurance company that we've found in the last 8 years that's actually willing to insure the vehicle itself while letting novices drive them on racetracks, right? So we actually have to insure them ourselves. It's basically self-insurance. We're using the money that everybody is contributing as like the rainy day fund in the event that something would happen. God forbid that would happen. We've never really had to draw on that in any significant way. But yeah, it's really just people are like how insurance works. Everybody buys the level of insurance that they're comfortable with, and that helps protect their financial liability because that's a huge component of it. And then that money helps us in the event that we need to fix anything that's due to a driver error.
And has somebody wrecked one of the cars yet? And I can't imagine that would be a comfortable experience.
Yeah, no. So far in 8 years, we've done about 250,000 driving experiences. We've had a few cars get banged up from typically it's somebody who's not listening. They show up with an ego and just are totally not listening to their instructor and think they can go further into a braking zone or something. And in that case, yeah, a car may slide off the track and get scuffed up or something. But no, we've never had any injuries or anything major that I would consider. But funny enough, like let's just say a front bumper, you go off the track and you mow through a sand trap or something and rip the front valance off the front bumper. You might be looking at a $10,000 bumper. So, we do everything possible to avoid that from happening. It's only happened a handful of times, but that's what the insurance is for. So that if in fact you did that scenario, your financial liability would be protected up to the deductible that you purchased.
Wow. I'm speaking with Joe Moore, the Chief Marketing Officer and co-founder of the Xtreme Xperience. So you mentioned that you have to go through some training. So some of these people obviously are not listening to the training, but it's not like you can just show up to the track and just jump in the car and say, all right, see ya.
Right, yeah. So safety is the number one priority for us. We've kind of baked it into the entire driving experience. If you've ever been on like a construction site, you see signs where it says safety first. That whole thing is kind of just to like, it's always around you. So we all the way down to the fact that our helmets have stickers on the backs of them. So when everyone's standing in line or whatever, there's a little safety reminder. But what we do naturally has some risk associated with it. But what we do is we take all those risks and we try to assess them head on to say, how could we help prevent these possible scenarios? So the driving instruction is a big one. Our professional drivers, it's not just like you're going to sit down to a video. One of our professional racing instructors who's been doing this for decades will sit down, or many years, will sit down and in an environment where you can pay attention. They'll use some slides to show you some different things, but they're going to really explain the fundamentals of performance driving and the things that most people should watch out for. So they're going to run you through all of that. And then another thing we do is this is an optional add-on for $49. You can actually go ride with a pro driver first. We have a whole fleet of track prepped sedans that we actually let our pros drive, and then you could put with 2 or 3 passengers in there, and then they're going to go out and drive the track to show you. That's another thing that really, really helps people understand what they're getting into. And then that third component is actually having a pro instructor in the right seat. It's not optional. Doesn't matter if you've won Le Mans before, you're still going to have a professional instructor in the right seat, and they're going to be there to coach you and tell you where to brake and where to be looking around the racetrack. And then that final component too is actually around the track putting cones up using a color-coded system that shows you when you see red cones, that means get on the brakes. When you see a green cone, that's your apex. You want to aim for that. When you see yellow cones, it means lift off the throttle. Orange cones are your track out points. So we've really it's like connect the dots. It's just you're in control on this adult themed roller coaster.
Are you just on the track by yourself, or are there other cars going around at the exact same time that you are?
There are other cars on the track. And the way we actually run that is we kind of run in sessions. So there's usually no more than 6 cars on the track at once. Our lead car, we call it one of those sedans, which are in 2021 are going to be Dodge Charger Hellcat wide bodies, which are 707 horsepower sedans. So that pro instructor goes out and everybody follows him, and then that instructor is just going to show you exactly what to do. And if you can keep up with a 707 horsepower, professional driver, then you're really going to be moving out there beyond most people's ability. So then if there's needs to be passes or anything, our instructors are all hooked up to radios, and we can communicate with one another and signal when to pass. So it's not just like go-karting where you're like ducking in on a corner, right? It's all coordinated so that no one's out there just kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah, I would think that would be a little inherently dangerous if you start letting, especially I would think men who are probably more often on your track than women, let the testosterone start flying when they're in the car and they're in the groove and they're getting into it. Yeah, getting into it. Are there a lot more men than women? How many women do you see come through the experience?
The funny thing is it's a two-pronged answer. As far as people purchasing this, it's about 50-50. A lot of men, a lot of women. This is a big gifting component, so a lot of people will buy it as a gift for the car enthusiast in their life. But then the actual participants themselves, it's about 80% male, 20% female. But the funny thing you mentioned guys, women are always the most attentive drivers, and funny enough, you'll see a couple show up and then the women always end up passing their husband or something because they're listening right. And the guy got into it with the ego, and then she just got in with with an open mind and listening, right? And so next thing you know, they're out there having a great time together. But yeah, so it's majority male, but we get plenty of female car enthusiasts and thrill seekers and just people who want to check something off their bucket list.
That's amazing. But as owner, are you nervous, as I would be, owning one of these cars, to let just some yahoo off the street, even though they went through their little training experience and they're all insured up, but just to let some yahoo off the street get into one of these expensive cars and just drive off? It's got to be somewhat of a little bit like I get nervous when my wife drives my car.
Yeah. It's funny. You would think, but I would just say that we have faith in our team and our the process. And we've done this so many times and made it so repeatable in a safe environment that we can control, like the racetrack, that it really is just a matter of letting the process work, letting our pros do their jobs, and having faith in the customer that they're going to go out and have a good time and not overdrive the car. So it is nerve-wracking, though. I mean, to some degree, for sure.
How could it not be? How could it not be? I'm speaking with Joe Moore, the Chief Marketing Officer and co-founder of Xtreme Xperience. You can find out more about him at the xtremexperience.com. For the most part, I'm sure people who show up to this thing, whether it was from a gift or they are just interested in doing it, this is probably the first time they've even been close to cars that are so iconic and so expensive and so fast. So tell me about some of the reactions that you've seen from people just seeing the car and then sitting in the car in the first time they get there.
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, most folks will never see them, and if you do, usually it's in passing down the road or something. And if they are available for you to look at, they're behind velvet ropes, or there's a do not touch sign in the window. And so it's funny that there's the big smiles when people show up, and you can see the anticipation and excitement when they can hear the Lamborghini going ripping down the straightaway and they see all the other cars in the pit. So there's that definite little kid in a candy shop smirk you'll get from even the most stern gentleman. And so they're definitely excited. And then the fun part, too, is once they get in the car, we tell them that car is yours for the laps that you're driving it. So get in there and feel like it's yours and take ownership and look around and, grab that leather-wrapped steering wheel and just really enjoy that experience because there really is, unless you've got a really rich uncle or somebody's going to throw you the keys to their Lamborghini, it's really nowhere else you're going to have this experience. So it's and then after the driving experience, I'll just say that's where things really, really get crazy. They get out of the car, they go hug their loved one. There's high fives all over the place, and just you can ask anybody, and we actually make a T-shirt that says this. But you ask anybody, hey, how was that? And they just exclaim, that was awesome. That's just everybody gets out of the car says that was awesome. It's basically our tagline. And you see people's literally like lives transform, especially the hardcore enthusiasts or the people who really were checking this off a bucket list, or they may have. We've had old Italian gentlemen show up who idolized Ferraris their entire lives and finally got to drive it. There's people who show up with legitimate bucket lists. They may have some diagnosis or they have terminal illness, and they're just really doing this as like something they've wanted to do their whole lives. And then there's just a whole range of people who this is just something they've aspired to do, or it looked interesting. They saw the ad, they want to do it. But the whole range, the reaction is the same, and it's just completely blown away and excited and giddy.
So it sounds like maybe the 3 laps that you're given as part of the experience maybe isn't enough for some people.
Yeah, it's addicting. It's extremely addicting, especially, you start to hit those apexes, and not just the car itself, but that whole idea of driving on a racetrack and getting better at it is extremely addictive. So yeah, a lot of folks choose to at the racetrack. Usually, if we have availability, you can book more spots, and a lot of guys get out of the car and just like, where do I sign up to do that again? I want to go again and again and again.
Like a casino where you're dropping more money at the casino.
It really is. We kind of joke about that. We're adrenaline dealers, So we actually just launched a new package for the hardcore enthusiasts. We call it Drive the Fleet, but you can actually drive 8 of the vehicles in one day. There's really nowhere else in the world you have the opportunity to do this. So, you're going to go compare a Ferrari to Lamborghini to a Porsche to an American muscle, Ford Mustang or a Corvette, and on, McLaren and down the list, and basically get to feel like a Top Gear presenter for a few hours and really get an informed opinion on these cars as opposed to just watching someone's opinion on YouTube,
Yeah, exactly. And I saw that the price for that is about $2,600. So how many people are able to just drop that kind of cash on that kind of experience? There obviously has to be people out there that are doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's our most expensive option. In the bottom end of the range, we're down at $199. So it's not like it's just, everybody all over the place buying $2,500 experiences, but we've really found there's quite a few people who are interested in it and are celebrating milestone birthdays or retirements, or it's definitely something that kind of like it's not like just people splurging randomly on it. It's usually to signify something, is what I've seen, relative to the other individual experiences.
You said you had a couple of Shelbys out there, or at least one. Did you have some enthusiasts that came out because of the Shelby versus Ford movie? Did anybody come out thinking that they're going to be the next Shelby out there on the racetrack?
Funny enough, we did actually. Yeah, that movie came out right as we added that car to the fleet. So quite a few folks have taken interest just in general. Like maybe they Googled, Shelby GT500 or Shelby or whatever, and then they find us and they're like, oh my gosh, I can actually go do this and live that kind of movie moment. It actually has happened.
And speaking of that, because the Shelby guys, and they would go on the Le Mans, and those are different kind of road tracks than, let's say, the Pike Peak International Raceway that's here in Colorado. A lot of the racetracks are just basically maybe not the oval, but at least it's go fast and turn left. So do each of the different tracks that you have around the country offer something different, a road course or just a go fast and turn left?
Yeah, 100%. So the interesting thing, like you mentioned, Pikes Peak International or any of the other speedways like Michigan International Speedway, or there's a number of them. But there's actually a road course through the middle. So you'll use some of the oval banking, but then you'll actually go do some of the squiggly stuff through the infield, and then get back on the track. Other tracks are designed just simply as road courses, and you get a variety across the country of some tracks have elevation changes, 150 feet going up and down hills and around corners, and you get different types of turns and different types of asphalts and different types. It's like playing different golf courses. If you're really into golf, like you can. There's links courses, and then there's big, beautiful landscape courses, and same thing with racetracks. So you really get different experiences no matter where you're at.
Yeah, I would think so. And you're doing this all right now during what could be one of the biggest surges in COVID activity around the country, and you're doing these experiences all around the country. So how are you able to mix the two? How are you able to tour during COVID?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting challenge. Back when it all began, back in March when the first news kind of came out. We actually ended up having to cancel two months worth of events. Over 8,000 driving experiences had to be moved and rescheduled and stuff. And but in that process, when we had that downtime, we were able to go back to the drawing board and completely look at the entire experience, start to finish. And the cool thing was that compared to any other motorsports events, we actually had already built a very, very structured, rigid framework so that, we have scheduled arrival times, right? So like everybody shows up at different times, which means they're actually leaving at different times. So our events only ever have enough people, at the track at once to kind of be within the state guidelines. So that's the first thing that we always look at. We look at the state and local, restrictions or anything like that. And then as soon as the state started to open back up with different guidelines for outdoor activities and such, we were able to just, find those guidelines and actually use them to our advantage within our current structure of how things work within our program. Then you add on top of that, the disinfecting between every single driving experience. We've got everybody wearing masks at our events, staff and customers. And then the funny thing is when you put on a racing helmet, you put on a balaclava first, and it's a big cotton thing that covers your whole face. So everybody's getting fresh head socks, balaclavas that cover up above your nose when you drive and stuff. So we're able to really just use our structure and then use the state guidelines and actually continue to run within what's considered safe and acceptable to do. So, and then the funny thing is that, or what we never saw coming, was that as the state started to open back up, I think people were really looking for outdoor activities because, the whole thing, you're in a 1,000-acre racetrack, right? So the whole event is completely spread out from check-in to waiting areas to our classrooms are now being done in outdoor, open tents and stuff. So, and socially distanced as well. So the whole thing, we have got an infinite amount of space to use, and we really do spread out and use it. And so the only time that you're actually getting into a vehicle with a pro instructor who's also wearing a KN95 mask and have the windows down in the vehicle, the car's been disinfected, and you're wearing a mask yourself. So, it just seems to work. I think people are really looking for something to do, and we're out there doing it.
And it seems that when I was looking at all the locations and looking at the bookings, it looks like there's a lot of places that are already booked up, and you're sold out for a lot of December for a lot of these races or these experiences that are coming up. So maybe it has, as you said, really helped your business more than hurt your business.
Yeah, you were right. We're definitely sold out through the remainder of the year, and I could never have expected that. And part of that too is, we wanted to self-impose some limits on things so that there weren't too many people showing up. But yeah, I mean, I never could have anticipated what was going to happen and what it was going to do for our bookings. And 2021 already is looking like people are really eager to put a date on their calendar and or buy a gift voucher or something like that. But we're seeing people right now as Black Friday comes up, just really, really interested in doing this experience.
Yeah, I know you guys are going to be out here in June, and that should be a good time after all the snow is gone, because we could still get snow in June. It's happened. I've seen it. I don't think it'll affect you, but we it's happened.
I will tell you, as far as weather goes, we have seen all of the random curveballs across the United States. We've had snow and ice in Texas when it shouldn't. We've had rain in Phoenix when it's not supposed to rain. We've had snow in Los Angeles when it's not supposed to snow. I mean, it's like, crazy wind gusts and storms and stuff that come ripping through when they weren't supposed to. So that's our biggest enemy, honestly, is the weather, and trying to avoid whatever random curveball any region could throw at us. But yeah, we've
it's just 2020.
Yeah,
it's really
exactly. Crazy enough, that we were up in we were hosting our events up in Seattle. In Portland. Portland is when all those fires were happening up there, and that was a whole. We actually almost had to cancel the event because of the visibility from smoke. So that was a whole other thing. It was like, oh my goodness, this is one thing after another. But
yeah, exactly. 2020 is just being 2020, right? Well,
exactly.
It sounds like it's a real fun time, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that'd be interested in and getting that maybe, as you said, as a gift for somebody else. So I appreciate all your time, your experience, and your knowledge, giving us what it's like to be as part of the Xtreme Xperience. If somebody wants to get some more details on this or get some more information, how do they do that?
I would say just Google Xtreme Xperience or head straight to our website. xxspeed.com is the easiest one, or just type in Xtreme Xperience. And you'll find a list of locations all across the country, as well as all of the fun vehicles that we're offering, and also some great discounts for the holidays as well. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. What about, I was just thinking about motorcycles. You have all the cars. What about a motorcycle, or is that just too risky?
Motorcycles currently too risky. We've been asked a lot about it. I don't know how we would do that, honestly. It'd probably be some sort of lead follow scenario, but it's something that's bounced around in our heads for sure.
Yeah, interesting. All right, Joe Moore, Chief Marketing Officer, co-founder of the Xtreme Xperience. Thanks again for all your time, and best of luck in 2021 and better weather for you in 2021 for the experiences.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to it.
And the link to the Xtreme Xperience is right here in the description of this show. So if you didn't get that website, you want to find out more about what they do, you can get it right there on the description. It takes you right to their site. Maybe it's a good gift to give to somebody who either has it all or somebody who always wanted to drive one of those fancy cars. They'll be out here in June in Colorado. Well, at least that's the plan. And so maybe I'll go check it out and see how that is. And it sounds pretty neat. Truth be told, I think I'd be fine at 110 or 120, but then probably start to pucker up a little bit any faster than that. I think like most things though, if you do it all the time, when you first show up and you have your 3 laps, it probably is such a blur that you're still reeling from it. But if you get to do it again and again, let's say you get to take a couple cars out, or you have the opportunity to do it, let's say a couple of months later, I think, or like those drivers, or professional drivers, are doing it all the time, so they're more comfortable with those speeds and more comfortable with being in the car and with that experience. It's always better the second time because you have that experience to draw from. So I think, like most things, if you do it all the time, it become more comfortable to go faster and faster. But just doing it the one time, I think it might be a little bit unnerving. Sounds like a good time, though. Those links, again, to contact them are in the description of the show. They're also there. You can see links to contact me in the description of the show. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Libb, the Traffic Guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.